Robert Patrick.
I'm your buddy Bob. I take about 75 minutes. Without a break. Because F. Scott Fitzgerald has decreed there are no second acts in American lives. And it is precisely my American and international lives through which I hope to charm you tonight. My life at the top, not my life as a top. Though God knows that factors into it. But life at the top. What I prefer to call my sludgy steps to the success pool. But ere I can sherpa you through those Himalayan heights in hindsight, I must sketch for you how I came to start at the bottom. In 1974, after 10 years as New York's most self-produced playwright, in coffee houses, bars, back rooms, basements, bookstores, and one unforgettable bowling alley, I made what I call Arthur Miller's Mistake. I fell in love with an actor. A brilliant, beautiful, French-Irish, reflexively Catholic, resolutely alcoholic genius named Joe. Joe was perfect for my plays. I wrote a dozen for him. He became my alter ego, and I became his ego alter. You see, a male actor is basically a man who hates himself so much that he will struggle, starve, study, suffer, wait tables, and even eat with other actors in order to get a chance to pretend to be anybody else. And his internal papal and parental demons will see that you are punished for it. To tell a person of such an orientation, "You're wonderful and I adore you," is to threaten the very foundations of his self-loathing. Joe and I did hit play after hit play in a ramshackle tavern in a neighborhood so colorful that one playwright said, "The only reason we get big audiences is people are afraid to come down here alone." I just tell my friends, turn left at the burning car. After every performance, Joe and I would stroll slowly from the tavern through those mean streets to his door, and my door, and his door, and my door, never entering either. I was boggled. If my affection threatened his identity, his rejection blew my whole cosmos. After all, "You're wonderful and I adore you" had worked with every other man I'd met. This craziness crested when I received my first playwriting award for a musical in which I, as a lovelorn poet from Texas, sang to Joe as Christ hanging on the cross. "Oh, you know that funny feeling when you feel someone is stealing all your lovely love and giving you none. When every time you call him, you can feel his staircase falling, cause you tell him love should ought to be fun. Well, then a person doesn't have to tell you a thing about a Catholic boy. Boy. You know, waking and you're shivering and shaking. If you don't have sex, you're gonna swoon. And then your lover telephones and sympathizes with your moans. And then he says he hopes you get well soon. Well, then a person doesn't have to tell you a thing about a Catholic boy. Helen did it to Troy. Tyrone got it from Attila. But these placebos do it with vanilla. You know the kind of fellow who will tell you soft and mellow that he understands your deepest needs. You think he knows just where it's at, then all at once you notice that he's even got a cross hung up on his beads. Well, then a person doesn't have to tell you thing one about a Catholic boy. On an acceleratingly rapid spiral down to what we euphemistically call a nervous breakdown. So when a force of nature named Ellen Stewart, the doyenne of New York's most famous underground theater, La Mama, ordered me to open a Los Angeles branch called La Mama Hollywood, I did as I was told. Our first La Mama Hollywood show at your John Anson Ford Theater was a raging success. But I was in no shape to deal with Hollywood actors who would skip rehearsals to discuss their roles with their life coaches. So I dropped way out, leaving La Mama Hollywood in the much more capable hands of Miss Jackie Lynn Colton, who is here with us tonight. So in the summer of 1974, I was sitting in my squalid West Hollywood flat, staring at my telephone, which received only incoming calls, and that only because the representative assigned to my case by AT&T happened to be a fan. It rang. It was the representative saying that he very much regretted that even my incoming calls were about to be turned off, and it was a shame that such a humiliating thing could happen to a great artist like me. I responded sympathetically, yada, 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 and hung up. It instantly rang again, my last call. It was my agent in New York asking, Robert, how are you going to get to New York? I replied, Dead and buried will get me back to New York. She riposted, well, you have to get yourself here because a pub theater in London wants to do your play, Kennedy's Children, and they'll only pay your way from New York. So you'll have to get yourself to Idlewild. I pointlessly hung up my now dead phone, my mind sludgily beginning to race. I recall a rumor that a theater in Chicago had been doing a pirated production of my play, The Haunted Host. I rushed to the street, borrowed an order from a porn star named Janie Gillis, and a collect call at the drama shelter in Chicago. They took the call, and I was ready to talk tough, but they gushed, where are you? We've been looking everywhere for you. We have hundreds of dollars saved up for you. We'll wire you bus fare. So I greyhounded to the Windy City, met them, saw their work, loved it, took their money, and started an affair with one of their techs. Not an actor. I bussed to Idlewild and flew to Heathrow. The owner of the King's Head pub in Islington, whose name happened to be Joan Crawford, explained to me that she loved my play Kennedy's Children, which is a rather somber series of alternating monologues for 5 refugees from the 1960s. But she was sure no one else would. But she was bankrupt and closing anyway, so she might as well close with a play she admired. She housed me in a room used to store coal and potatoes and allowed me to earn my meals by tending bar. Now, in London, famous people will often work at the small theaters in between paying jobs. So my play was to be helmed by Clyde Donner, who had directed Woody Allen's first movie, What's New Pussycat? And the role of the simple-hearted schoolteacher was to be played by Oscar winner Glenda Jackson. Overnight, I became the darling of the press. The Cinderella playwright, sleeping in a coal bin, but directed by Donner. Now, I had experienced celebrity secondhand in New York, twice. Once when a TV film crew followed me around a street fair and then aired the footage as Tiny Tim tiptoeing through the same And another time on East 3rd Street when a street crew in a deep pit whistled and catcalled at me because they thought I was the Greek actress Melina Mercouri. This was something very different. London had not had an openly gay bohemian playwright to be a gaga since Joe Orton's lover murdered him. I seemed to fill a gap. My long hair, t-shirts, and overalls made news. When I was refused entrance to Claridge's restaurant because of that outfit, that made news. I was invited to all the press parties. And in London, they are oppressed because the rooms are so small. Fortunately, the people are small too. So playwright Tom Stoppard and I, and Monty Python star John Cleese, developed a waving and chatting relationship over the heads of the critics. A press agent invited me to dine with him, and then rising stars, beautiful blonde British Malcolm McDowell, and feisty Texas redhead Gail Honeycutt. These stars were meeting for the first time to decide if each other were prominent enough for them to have a publicity affair with. The redhead opened. Well, I'm just back from Israel, where I did a picture with Burton Hall. The blog was a god. Burt Reynolds and Paul Newman. Well, no, Burt Lancaster and Paul Schofield. I'm about to start filming Harold Pinter's play, The Birthday Party, with Alan Bates and Sir Laurence Olivier. Oh, from what studio? Well, actually, it's for television. I don't know if they ever got together because right then work reared its beautiful head and we began rehearsals. Glenda called saying, "Clyde, darling, some fool has offered me $1 million to do a picture and I think it would be rude to refuse." But Clyde took down a beautiful big book they have there with pictures of every actor in England wanting to work. We found a great American actress, Shirley Knight, who was there with her British playwright husband, John Hopkins. We instantly sent her the script to play the role of the simple-hearted schoolteacher, and she instantly sent it back saying, "This isn't a play, it's just a series of alternating monologues." Glenda sent us her friend, Ebullient Vivian Pickles, who was the mother in Harold and Maude, and rehearsal proceeded apace. Opening night, the audience was rhapsodic, and we all regretted that we were there just for a limited 2 weeks run. The next morning, Clyde and Joan and my British agent woke me with the best opening night reviews since Oklahoma and contracts to sign for the translation of the play into 60 languages. Invitations tripled. At a big movie premiere. Every star in England was there, including Michael York, the beautiful blonde star of Cabaret. But I had eyes only for Sir John Gielgud, easily the greatest actor ever to walk the stage. I was hustled to him by comedian Victor Spinelli. Sir John said, "I so admire your beautiful play. I do hope you'll sing me one." Dancing like a puppy. I said, "Oh golly gee, Sir John, I don't know how to take a compliment from someone so great like you." Yes, it is difficult, isn't it? I recall that it took me many years to learn the art, and I'm going to pass the fruits of that labor on to you. Simply do as I need to do. Say thank you, and go try to put the make on Michael York. Proceeded to do. I was less humble with certain other celebrities, serving as doorman at the King's Head. One night, when playwright John Osborne and director Lindsay Anderson had completely destroyed the first act with their cigar smoking and raucous laughter and boos and catcalls at the actors, I slammed the doors, refusing them entrance for Act 2. This made the papers. They have a paper there called the Evening Standard, which gives a playwriting award, which is the equivalent of our American Tony. When Harold Pinter's wife, Lady Antonia Fraser, bragged in print that she had talked all the other judges out of giving the prize to Kennedy's children on the first vote, that made more news than if I had won the award. And it also explained why Lady Antonia Fraser is an oxymoron. The play moved to the prestigious Arts Theatre, and I traveled to Scotland and Ireland and Wales and France and Holland and Austria and Cape Town and Venezuela to see productions of it. And what did all this mean to a lovelorn top from Texas? Nada. Zilch. Delian. Nothing, honey. And why? Because Joe didn't love me. I did what, believe it or not, seemed at the time the sensible thing to do. I turned down Clyde Donner's offer to direct The Haunted House on the West End with Malcolm McDowell and Alan Bates, and instead gave it for free to Europe's first gay play festival, on condition they would allow me to fly over Joe and another New York actor I was also in love with. My thinking, if it deserves that term, was this. After they saw me in my fame and wealth and power, one of them was bound to fall in love with me. They fell in love with each other. As time went on, I learned that I was far from being the only victim of Joe's Vatican upbringing. As years went by, more and more I found myself in this situation. Many men come wandering in and ask what's wrong with you. They think I was once your guy and should know what to do. Somewhere they read you loved me and begged me to try to remember. But you never said you loved me, not even a lie to remember. Now and then, among those men, I find one for a fling. An afternoon forgotten soon, that doesn't mean a thing. Oh, Joe, if instead you loved me, we roar as we rendezvous. Then once again, we're many men, hopelessly loving you. gift to the love Lord, a frighteningly cheap red wine called Plunk. It tastes like fingernail polish remover laced with Kool-Aid. A typical day at the top. I woke, kicked aside the cold, went downstairs to get drunk for the day, then strolled to Trafalgar Square to see my agent. Passing through en route, meet Leicester Square, where on my right, a newsstand had a row of magazines with my picture on the cover, and on the left, the Leicester Square Cinema boasted Barbra Streisand's worst movie, Funny Lady, about the emptiness of success. I had already seen it 5 times. In Trafalgar, I signed checks and contracts, and then bought a ticket to a matinee of a play about the Beatles. My stellar presence caused such commotion among the audience that it disturbed the actors. At intermission, or interval as they say, the head usher asked me to leave, adding, "Your sort should come meet me and take private boxes, sir." I got on a 2-story bus. A dozen schoolboys shouted, "Oh, there's a famous guy!" and rushed to my side of the bus, causing it to wobble. The conductor asked me to dismount, and "Your sort should take taxis, sir." Leicester Square, I once again sat through Funny Lady and its accompanying short subject, Jersey, Isle of Contrasts. I made my way to the bar at the Arts Theatre to begin my evening plunking, and a lyric voice to my right ordered drinks. I turned, and there stood the loveliest metamorphosis of matter that evolution had yet achieved. A Walt Disney doe in human female form, with tousled bronze hair and great gray-green eyes. I put down what could easily have been my last drink. I said, "Miss, I don't know if you're an actress, but it doesn't matter. I can teach you to act. I want to direct you as George Bernard Shaw's St. Joan. Anyone would follow you anywhere." She said ruefully, "Oh, I wish that it were so." And a voice from a table yelled, "Vanessa, where are the drinks?" I had offered to teach Miss Redgrave how to act. Later, I learned why she was present at my theater. After Act 1, she went upstairs to try to talk the cast out of going on for Act 2 in protest against something or other. Evelyn Norton, playing my hippie girl, flung her down the stairs, shouting, "For God's sake, Vanessa, not at interval!" So for the next few days, coming out of Funny Lady and Jersey, Isle of Contrasts, I saw my St. Joan cruising the theater area in bandages and dark glasses, looking for someone else's show to close. I was in great danger of memorizing the narration of Jersey, Isle of Contrasts. This could not go on. It did not. Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. said they wanted to do Kennedy's Children. Now, I didn't care if I never returned to my homeland, but I am so shallow that I wanted t-shirts that said Kennedy's Children at Kennedy Center. So I hopped on a plane. While I was mid-Atlantic, Arthur Schlesinger read the play and said, "No, no, 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 no." So I was ready to turn around at Dulles Airport, but some rich young fool from New York had flown to Dulles precisely to beg me to let him produce Kennedy's Children off-Broadway, where, had I had the brains to accept this offer, I have no doubt it would still be running tonight, 37 years later. But I didn't want to stay, so I arrogantly made an impossible condition. I said, "No, it's Broadway or nothing." He agreed. I was stuck. We brought Clyde Donner over to direct. I flew my boyfriend in from Chicago to keep me sane. The producer leased the Golden Theater, which is where Betty Davis acts in All About Eve, and got it for amazingly low rent because they said they were so eager to house my prestigious play. It seemed a good omen. I discovered New York Celebrity. It is rougher than the British version. At a gallery opening of a show of new photographs by my idol Richard Avedon, the paparazzi and autograph hounds pursued the celebrities so vigorously they knocked pictures off the wall. The famous designer Halstead was supposed to come but couldn't make it, so his lover came. The hounds pursued him. I spotted Warren Beatty cowering in a corner, shook his hand and thanked him for kind words he had said about the play in London. He didn't remember it, me, or them. By the way, his hands were soft as cream and he had never done a day's work in his life. Elevator doors opened. I saw an aggressive actress named Sylvia Miles, who posed in the elevator with Tennessee Williams. I started to get on. She said, "Not yet, honey." Went down, came back up to pose with Norman Mailer, and once more to pose with Richard Avedon. And I was allowed to descend. We set about casting, which was easy except for the role of a girl named Carla, a would-be sex goddess. We saw every lovely lady in New York, and no one was right. We almost cast Betty Buckley, but her solution to every speech we had her read was to break into tears. A gift which served her well singing Midnight in Cats a few years later. I flew in my friend Mary Warnock, a Warhol star from California. Clive agreed she was absolutely perfect for the role, but he felt he was not strong enough to direct her. He offered to step down and have me direct the play. Well, I couldn't do that. His prominence was what brought the first attention to the play in London. I said, "I can't do that, but let's just cancel the production and both of us go back to England." So we were drinking to that in the mournful Manhattan twilight when the phone rang. It was the agent for Shirley Knight, whom you remember we had almost cast as a school teacher in London. She was in America, wanting to work, and she was ours if we wanted her. We wanted her. She was one of the few actresses who could have played both roles. The next day, we gathered for our first read-through. Martha Swope of the Times took photos, the equity lady made people sign things, and we got in a circle to read. The simple-hearted school teacher opens the play. Both my old friend from off-Broadway, Barbara Montgomery, and Shirley began to read. Barbara cast me a poisonous look, Shirley a puzzled one, and Clive said, no, Shirley, darling, it's the other role. Shirley said, "You want me to play a 29-year-old hippie?" No, dear, the other role. Please pardon me for taking up your personal time, but I did read the entire play, and it seemed to me that Carla is the most articulate and intelligent character in the play, and that her tragedy is that these fine qualities are of no avail in our time. Clive referred to me as the author, and I said, "Exactly." Shirley said, "You want me to play an intelligent woman?" "Please." "All right." And 7 months later, Shirley received her Tony.
I'm not interested in the 60s. I'm not interested in any of these nostalgic eras they're reviving, to tell you the truth. I mean, what are they really all about? I keep hearing the faggots I know saying, "Oh, New York now is really Berlin in the 30s again." But it's not, you know. That's just people trying so desperately to find some meaning for their own time. I don't want to get into anything heavy. This isn't really the place, and that isn't really what I came here for. Besides, I've learned anything, and I think sometimes I have. I think sometimes I've learned everything. I've learned that people don't want to hear me talk about ideas. People don't want to hear me talk more. People want to look at me. I hate the young 60s. Oh, I hate everything that happened and everything that didn't happen, and I hate what happened to me and what happened to other people. I take care of it. Do you agree about the 60s? Okay? Let's just get that clear. They were rotten. They started out rotten and they got worse. I mean, they started out with Marilyn Monroe dying. How good did they get? That's when they started for me. Look at it out there. Raining. I don't think the 70s are any kind of overwhelming heaven either, if you want to know what I think. In fact, if you want to know what I think, I know you don't. But even if you don't want to know what people think, the sad fact is they're going to go right on thinking it anyway. Why? Me, Carla. Well, I personally, deep down in my own unsubdivided, living, pulsing, throbbing, unknowable, uncared for, and utterly unimportant consciousness thing is that the 70s are just the garbage of the 60s.
A few days before we left for tryouts in Boston, the greatest critic in the world, the most important one, Clive Barnes, published a career-making rave review of the London production in the New York papers. My boyfriend and I ran up and down 7th Avenue reading it by streetlight to baffle passers-by. It seemed another good omen. Two interesting things happened in Boston. One, we were housed in the huge Wilbur Theater. My American and British agents, both of whom attended, said, "Robert, Kennedy's Children is a tiny little coffee house play." "Robert, your words can't possibly fill an old opera house like the Wilbur." Well, Clive used the space to insert subtle staging and interaction and lighting that greatly enriched the play. And opening night, the audience stood and applauded until the actors were bowing. The second thing was, a talk show host in Boston, off camera, said to me, "I assume you know that the reason I'm praising your play so much is that I assume you're going to cut the homo character before you take it to New York." I remembered that remark, and as soon as possible, I opened in Boston my very, very homo play, The Haunted Host, starring a 19-year-old drag stripper named Harvey Fierstein.
Yeah.
Of course,
The Wilbur Theater asked us to stay another 4 months, but the producer was already paying Rhythm the Golden, so we came back to New York. We had the Golden for only one afternoon rehearsal before opening that night. I told the producer that if he would give me the house for that run-through, I would ask for no comps during the entire run of the show. So 800 of my off-Broadway cronies stamped, whistled, cheered, yelled, booed, cried, laughed, tore the seats out. The cast was staggered and incredibly encouraged. There was one sour note that afternoon. Backstage at the theater, I received a call from the young man who had interviewed me for the New York Times.
I just couldn't let him get us on tape because... just go ahead and say it. I had orders to make you look like a fool, and sound like a fool. What are you laughing at? I must not have made myself clear. You see, I had orders. I mean, you're going to hate what I've written. I had to take everything out of context, and the rewrite voice made it sound even worse. You see, word around the department is the London critics ditched the Times for not having discovered you first, so we're out to get ourselves off the hook representing you as me. They are, I mean. This isn't funny. This is my first big job. I mean, I had no idea it would be this bad at the top. I'm sure I was ready for compromise, subterfuge, cynicism, hell, even unadulterated evil, but this petty, small-minded, self-serving vindictiveness, I wish you wouldn't laugh.
But you know, it isn't that hard to make me look like an idiot, so I didn't let it worry me. That evening we discovered why the Golden had rented so cheaply. Greece was next door. My drowned-out cast had to abandon Clive's subtle staging and stomp down stage front and shout their lines as loudly as they could. Nevertheless, the audience received it heartily. Tennessee Williams attended, and his characteristic laugh could be heard at a joke about himself. Then came the traditional opening night party at Sardi's. My boyfriend didn't want to go. Let me give you some advice in your love life. If you are unsure whether your lover's feelings are fading, arrange to open the show on Broadway. And if he doesn't want to attend the Sardi's party, something is afoot. The party itself was bewitching and bewildering. The great New York Times theatrical caricaturist Al Hirschfield sought me out to apologize. He said he had begged to draw my cast to the paper, but had been absolutely forbidden to. But Tennessee Williams was there, asked me to share his table, and when our conversation was interrupted by a tiny female fan of his who literally climbed over the heads of onlookers to fall in his lap, he asked for my phone number so he could call me the next day. My first callers the next day were the producer and Clive, with reviews that ranged from scathing to merely dismissive. Even Clive Barnes, who only weeks before had praised the play to high heaven, barely reviewed it in a squib and gave no opinion of it at all. The producer called him to ask why he had backtracked, and he says that Barnes said only, "Oh, did I?" No Broadway producer would accept my next play even to read, except one fabulous crook named Alexander H. Cohen, who invited me and my American agent to his palatial office. There he showed us a contract with a check paper clipped to it for $25,000. He then put it aside while he explained how he saw the play. Then he clumsily substituted for it a similar-looking contract with a check for $2,500, with his thumb barely covering the lower denomination as he held a pen out to us. My agent's eyes narrowed. He said, "Robert, will you wait for me in Mr. Cohen's foyer?" In the foyer, two of his employees separately approached me to whisper, "Don't let him produce your play. He'll get rich and you won't make a penny." My agent came out, her face frozen in a smile, and said, "Robert, Mr. Cohen has kindly offered us his car." In the limo, I started to speak and she shushed me. When we got out, I asked what that was, and she said, "Robert, I hear the son of a bitch has tape recorders in all his cars." My friends, when they called the Golden or the Broadway ticket offices, were told there were no tickets available for Kennedy's Children. And there were thousands. There were hardly any non-musical plays opening on Broadway that season. So everyone assumed Kennedy's Children would get a Tony nomination. The Tony Committee broke its own rule and nominated instead a play that had actually opened the season before. Tennessee Williams called me and said, "Child, what have you done to the media?" As you know, I am here in town to promote my new book on all the talk shows, and I have tried to extol to them your enviable achievement. But to a man, they have forbidden me to, as they so pungently put it, plug you. Lily Tomlin called me and said, "Oh, why didn't you hire me for the role of the hippie before Nashville came out and my price got too high for you? Why didn't you?" In the lobby of the Golden, Shirley MacLaine grabbed me by the arm, shaking me quite violently, and said, "Oh, why the fuck didn't you make me take the role of Carla? My agent wanted that goddamn Vegas money. Why didn't you make me?" My boyfriend dragged me outside, and on the sidewalk he encountered Julie Newmar, 6 feet tall, in spike heels, and wearing a Timbuktu turban. She said, "Ah, you must fire Shirley Knight and hire me to play Carla. Only I am Carla." And she proceeded to do one of Carla's more obscene speeches right on the sidewalk at full volume. We were all ambulating, available, automated, eager meat. And she grabbed my hand, pulling me into 8th Avenue traffic where understandably a cab screeched to a halt for her, saying, "You must come to my apartment. Tomorrow morning you will see that I am Carla." She and my boyfriend played tug of war with me. She finally noticed him and said, "And you, young man, where are you going?" He pointed at my crotch and said, "Right there, lady." She whooped in horror and sped away, and we crawled to safety on the sidewalk. I encountered a friend in the lobby of the Golden.
God, don't touch me, Robert. I was trying to avoid you. I can't go back in there for your second act. I brought you these flowers, but now I just don't know. I don't know if I'm at a preview or a flashback. God, I wanted to yell, "No, don't go to the March on Washington. Cops beat your husband. He gets hooked on morphine." Or, "No, don't take your big scrapbook with you to Woodstock. Norwegian journalists steal all your letters from Dylan." God, she is me, isn't she? That incredibly young woman playing the hippie? God! Did you hear your audience talking at intermission? Those are the people that sent police dogs on me, and now they're praising you for capturing my essence. Did you see the go-go fashions they're wearing? Designers leaned out of windows on 7th Avenue and copied what we wore on our peace marches, so those matinee fashions in their tie-dye denim could cheer me but I'm not sure you're not the worst of all. Those are the minute particulars of my real life that you've turned into some universal symbol. I'm completely forgotten, but I'm on the West End in Broadway. She's paid to play me, and I'm taking in piecework sewing jobs. Robert! If I write my own life now, someone will call me a plagiarist. I know in my heart that you love me and revere me, but you know in yours, you're standing there listening to me, and all you're hearing is one more dynamite monologue.
And my lover left me saying, Bob, I want a stable environment. And you could fix a stable. At this point, my view of relationships could only have been expressed by Elaine Stritch. Jewish lovers' attitudes are basically parental. Catholics have ugly moods and then get sentimental. Protestants consider you another home appliance. Atheists subject you to psychiatric science. Religions could combine ideally, but it's such a muddle. The cutest Buddhist nudist really only wants to cuddle. Throughout my sexually active years, from Roosevelt through Reagan, I vainly sought through veils of tears another horny pagan. Washed my hands of the great white way, left the cast to eke out a dreary 2-month run, and headed for Washington State, where I was to direct the play at the Seattle Repertory Theater.
Yeah.
Among the 3 worst managements under which I have ever labored. Opening night, Kennedy's Children started at 8 and was 2 hours long. At 9:30, 1/3 of the audience stood and left the theater. I turned to the light man, who said, "Oh yeah, the last ferry leaves at 10. Didn't anybody warn you?" Nobody warned me. And speaking of things that nobody warned me about, one night the light booth phone rang, and it was my New York agent saying, "Robert, do you mind if Shelley Winters takes over the role of the school teacher for the national tour of Kennedy's Children?" Mind? I had admired Shelley Winters in dozens of movies. I was elated. Nobody warned me. A few days later, I happened to be unexpectedly passing through New York, so I called my agent. She said, "Robert, if you hurry, you can get to the Golden Theater in time to see the dress rehearsal of the Shelley Winters Company of Kennedy's Children." Shelley Winters Company? At the Golden, I found Shelley and 4 strangers on the stage, completely ignoring the attempts of the stage manager to direct them. Shelley, as a simple-hearted school teacher, wore a black bomb on cocktail dress, 2 strings of pearls, and a meat stove. She had 2 working phones on her table, into both of which she was talking, except when she was screaming directions at the other actors. It seems that the Broadway cast had all quit when they found out Shelley was coming into the show. Nobody warned me. Shelley had cast friends and told them, "Since it's all monologues, we don't have to learn lines. We can just improvise like we do at Actors Studio." I ran to the phone and called Equity, which said, "Shelley Winters, she's a star. We can't do anything to her."
No way.
I went with the company to Chicago, futilely trying to get Shelley to run lines. She Faint, sick, staying in bed in a blacked-out hotel room while Farley Granger brought her chicken sandwiches and chocolate maltings. Except when she rose from her bed of pain to go on the Irving Kupcinet show. She asked me to go along to carry her wig box and her hair dryer. The other guests were Sidney Poitier, Harry Belafonte, Charlo the Coochie Coochie Girl, and stage great Mary Martin, who was there to promote her autobiography. Shelley opened her mouth and it never closed. She explained the Black Power movement to Sidney Poitier. She cautioned Charlo to learn to act before her figure fell. And she criticized people who criticized me for being gay, saying, "Oh, lots of the famous people I've known have been gay." And she proceeded to name them all. At a break, Irving Kupcinet came to me and said, "Bob, you want to go on the show?" I replied, "I'd sooner have pork in the synagogue." After the show, Mary Martin happened to pause near me. I reminded her that in San Antonio she had had me into her dressing room and given me advice on how to get ahead in theater. She looked me up and down, standing tangled in the camera cable, in my overalls, t-shirt, and scraggly hair, holding Shelley's baggage, and said without a trace of sarcasm, "Well, and look where it got you." The next day, I closed my script and said, "Shelley, you have no intention of learning lines, have you?" She said, "Well, my ex-husband's family in Italy and my daughter, I said, no, it's fine, I'm not about it. I'll sue the producer, he'll sue you, lawyers will take care of it, it's all, it's fine. But I want you to do me one favor. I want you and Farley to dress up like movie stars and the three of us lunch downstairs in public." Shelley pirouetted into her balmain, Farley into his savile robe, and the three of us marched arm in arm down the stairs. The maitre d' automatically lifted the robe for us and automatically closed it to all others. And for 2 hours, these two movie stars dished the dirt on every great person of the 20th century who they had known or who had known them. We opened to reviews like Shelley Winters in rambling, repetitious role. I sued the producer, he sued Shelley, she skipped the country, the extensive tour had to be canceled, and whatever tiny hopes I might ever have had of a commercial American theater career dwindled down to one tiny flickering spark and died. But a new star rose in the west. Marlo Thomas of the sitcom That Girl called me and said, "I know you probably don't want to work for me, but hear me out. I want to get rid of my That Girl image. I'm producing an hour-and-a-half special called That Woman. The first hour will be skits by famous writers. Those are already written. But I want you to write an original two-person play for me and Lily Tomlin. Will you come?" Marlo's words and the names of the stars who were to be in the skits stirred something ancient in my soul. And I remembered my boyhood dreams in the Southwest of wanting to be part of that industry. Life has brought me plenty, but way back in 1920, I could have been signed by MGM. They had 6 or 7 more stars than there are in heaven, all of them designed by MGM. Personnel would contact any kid to sign a contract who could sing or dance or even swim. They told every actor, when you're finished at Max Factor, you'll be Jewel Leo's diadem. Wish I was a player scared to death of L.B. Mayer, serving Master Irving Thalberg's whim on a golden age soundstage at MGM. They did moving magic for the comic and the tragic stories that they shot at MGM. Medieval castles or dancing ladies' tassels, only on the spot at MGM. They could make an ocean or an earthquake in slow motion, or a super duper pseudonym. Centuries Joan Crawford, their enormous backlot was a geographic jackpot. Go to Rome or come home to Aunt M. They sent Judy Garland over rainbows to a farland, but nobody thought, including them, that Oz was awesome, as was MGM. Their casket schedule ranged from Garbo clear to Gable, platinum to brass at MGM. Yet they could make a classy vehicle for Liz and Lassie. Nothing ever crashed at MGM. They could make a PG picture of a book like Gigi, all about a teenage fatal film. Quentin Tarantino hadn't been born yet, but we know there's sick security on him. In between the silence and excessive sex and violence, though its glow is growing rather dim, the greatest good of Hollywood was MGM. Picked me up at the airport and drove me to the Beverly Hilton, where there awaited me a beautiful red Remington Rand typewriter and a complimentary full-length bathrobe. She left me to settle in and said she'd be back for us to have dinner and discuss what I might write over the next 2 weeks. I was so turned on. I sat down at the Remington Rand in my full-length bathrobe and in an hour wrote My Cup Runneth Over, a half-hour, fast, funny, furious quarrel between two roommates, one of whom is an unexpected overnight success, based on my recent experiences and on those of my acquaintance in New York, Patty Smith.
Yeah!
When Marlo returned, I showed her the script, and she said, "It's perfect, but I've hired you for 2 weeks." I said, "You'll save money." She said, "No, I have an idea. Why don't you stay and look over the skits that these other writers have written?" I said, "Fine," and proceeded to work. But there was a small, peculiar problem that developed. Marlo told me, "You're not writing for your New York sophisticates when you write for television. You're writing for people who don't vote." But the environment was not conducive to mediocrity. One Sunday, I ran out of typewriter ribbon, and I called Marlo and said, "Marlo, the pages," that's what they call scripts in the industry, "won't be ready Monday." She said, "That's all right. I got someone writing a movie for me on the 4th floor. She'll have ribbons." She turned out to be Elaine May of the Nicholson and the genius who wrote and starred in A New Leaf. Timidly, I sat with her for half an hour discussing these tacky Hollywood people. Then we both went back to hacking for their tacky money. When I stepped on the elevator, there would be Elton John and Paul McCartney, or Warren Beatty and Dolores Del Rio, all of them constantly chattering out loud and with full of anxiety about their apparently permanently imperiled careers. Once when I stepped on, there was a famous naturalist writer arguing with his wife. She said, "You are famous, you are." He said, I'm not, nobody knows me. You, young man, you know who I am. Well, since I had just been staring at a 6-foot portrait of him in the Hilton bookstore, I had to admit I did. I thought the man would murder me. I called Marlo and said, "I just can't think like Archie Bunker in this branch of Schwab's drugstore." So she kindly moved me 2 blocks up on Rodeo Drive to a more proletarian pad. Someone there even stole my bathrobe. But the fact was, I was spending most of my time at Marlo's mansion. She had taken a maternal liking to me and wanted to teach me how things really get done in show business. For instance, all 3 networks were constantly after Marlo to return to a sitcom, than which she would rather die. So I was baffled when she invited me to have lunch in her garden with her and a representative from each of the networks who were to bid on her sitcom services. They arrived, 3 beautiful young men, all in pastel suits, and began bidding. Marlo pulled his strings like a puppeteer, and then, exactly as if by chance, her even more famous father, Danny Thomas, appeared. He apologized, but the 3 networkettes begged him to stay. You see, he was even more famous for his acumen in Los Angeles real estate. They were all investors. He knew every property they owned. He told one, "The wiring in that motel of yours in Encino is substandard." And the other, "You better check the sewage pipe in that shopping mall of yours in Calabasas." They were drooling at his feet. He said he had to go because he was having trouble raising money for his favorite charity, the St. Jude's Hospital for Children. The networkettes almost wet their pastel pants competing to see who could write him the biggest check the fastest. He left donations in hand and networkettes in tow. I turned to Marlo, who simply looked at me and went, In fact, I would have been staying at Marlo's mansion all along, except that her guest room was occupied by her then lover, David Gavitt, the president of Warner Brothers Studio, whom she was nursing through a cold. On the day he descended, he took one look at me, another person in the room, a mere writer at that, and began turning flip-flops trying to impress me. And believe me, in the industry, writers rank well below the parking lot squirrel. I'm the most important man in Hollywood. I'm the most important man in Hollywood. You don't believe me? You don't believe me? I believed him, but he Mack trucked right over me. I'll show you. I'll show you. The whole world was waiting for me to cast the most important role of the decade, the disillusioned priest in Exorcist II. And I'm going to do it right now. I'll show you. I'll cast John Boyd. Marlo winked and said, "John Boyd, you think really?" He slammed the phone down, broke out into a visible beaded sweat and said, "You don't think John Boyd?" She said, "Well, I don't know. Maybe I thought maybe somebody from the war." "Where on him? Like maybe Richard Burton?" He said, "Yes, Richard Burton." I'll cast him right now. And so he did. And 2 days later, Burton, in a beautiful white chain-knit Irish sweater, was on TV giving interviews about how much he admired his co-star, little Miss Linda Blair. I asked Marlo, "Why do you think Burton's better?" She said, "Bob, I don't care who plays the disillusioned priest in Exorcist II. Nobody cares. I just wanted to teach you how things get done." She may have taught me better than she knew. With production nearing, her producers arrived from New York, having just read a musilogynous book called Passages by Gail Sheep, The New Testament of Positive Thinking. They read the skits and were appalled, especially by one about a housewife whose marriage is saved by a facelift called Change of Wife. They said, "This seems to imply that looks are important in a relationship, whereas we all know it's inner harmony that matters." Well, I, whose life had been destroyed by my lack of good looks, and Marla, whose career had been made by her nose job, gazed at them across a vast philosophical gulf. They were also shocked by a skit based on the Charlton Heston epic called Earthquake. The skit was entitled Birth Rage. Marla and Charlton were to play unheeded population analysts who, along with the rest of the human race, smothered under a mounting pile of newborns because everyone ignored their warnings that at a certain statistical spot, every female on Earth was going to give birth to triplets. But we were all soon united by a very real problem. We couldn't find Lily Tomlin. Not even Dave Geffen with his punch phone could find Lily Tomlin. We learned later that she was secretly touring small cities all over the country to try out material written for her by her lover, Jane Wagner.
Yeah.
But at the moment, Marlo started calling every young actress in Hollywood. Liza Minnelli was working. Lynn Redgrave was working. Valerie Harper was working. Marlo cried, every actress in Hollywood is working but me. Our director, Marshall W. Mason, arrived to find he had no cast, no script, and no sets. And by triangulation, no show. Marlo drove me to the airport weeping. I only get to act about 4 days a year, and this year I won't even have that. At the airport, I presented her with a check, everything she paid me, asking only if she'd give me the stage rights to my cover and photo. She said, you want the material? But Bob, TV material gets old fast. I said I was willing to take that risk, and my cover and photo became my most performed work.
You want a photo quick? Okay. How about this? I don't believe in foods without preservatives because they'll never last. Thanks! You just need exclusive interviews with Larry King. Maybe talk about Rebecca Conklin putting on t-shirts. It'll be cheap. That won't stop me. Larry King? He's real! Why did he record it? Because he doesn't make records. He writes. I write too, Bridget. Paula, is there any way to leave the radio on all the stations simultaneously? Oh, yes, there is. You'll find it. Wish you well. I wish you were. Paula, are you okay? I'm okay. You're okay. Great. Real book. Your face looks like a pig. Thanks. Did I do something wrong? Oh, I have People magazine. I washed the dishes in our sauce last night, didn't I? Yes. And I didn't wash them together, did I? Did I leave our sauce on the champagne glasses? No. Oh. Did I leave my electric car plugged in again all night? You can afford it. Yeah, there's a new endorsement at the electric company. But Robin, why are you uptight? I'm not uptight. Don't forget to anxiety will leave. Am I doing that again? I'm sorry. I didn't know I'm doing that until you tell me. Thank you. Sure. Poor Prince George, she asked herself, then profoundly, turning to work. But you do seem upset. Is it possible that you're anxious and projecting your anxieties onto me, and then projecting your projecting onto my projecting them onto you?
Used to be every time I did a big check for that play, I'd send the Xerox of the check to Marlo. To my great surprise, in New York, Marlo's producers called me and asked if I would be willing to come to their apartment/office and write a special for them there. I said, sure. When I arrived, I found a table with 7 other writers around it with whom I was expected to write. I couldn't. I never had. I never could. It reminded me of Air Force basic training when the toilets didn't have doors on them. I told him, I'm sorry, I can't do this. And he said, Bob, you seem upset. Here, why don't you sit down? Here, have a glass of water. Take one of these little blue pills. Well, anyways, I was sure they were the nicest people in the world, except for those 7 wonderful guys I was going to write a wonderful special with around that wonderful table with that little pyramid of blue pills always in the middle of the table. For 2 weeks I worked blissfully on a special which I seem to recall was for John Belushi and Mikhail Baryshnikov. At the end of 2 weeks, I spent 2 weeks in agony, kicking little blue pills, and believe me, television. That would have been the end of my contact with fame and celebrity, except that all of a sudden, my play Judas became good luck for elder leading men. I was in Vienna on my way to Israel to see a real war when Sir John Gielgud called me and said, I so want to do your play Judas. Can we meet to discuss an American tour? We met in his dressing room in London, and he said that he loved the play, that he would have been doing it at that moment if my agent had gotten it to him sooner, and agreed that I would go to New York to talk with producer Richard Barr about the tour. As I was leaving, Sir John casually asked if I minded to show the script to the director friend. Hey, he had the most beautiful dressing gown I've ever seen. Stone green silk with a delicate overlay pattern of golden peacock feathers. I didn't mind anything. In New York, Dick Barr was a bit taken aback that I had rewritten the Bible, the plays about Pontius Pilate trying to talk Jesus out of being crucified, but as excited about Sir John as I was. Alas, the director to whom Sir John showed the script as his published diaries would attest was that same Lindsay Anderson whom I had kicked out of So I received a wire informing me that I was no longer to use the name of Sir John Gielgud to promote my work. However, an angel named Martha Scott, who played Charlton Heston's mother in both Ben-Hur and the Ten Commandments, had become a producer and saw a college production of Judas and wanted to bring it and its star, one Laird Williamson, to Broadway. But Laird said, I don't see New York as the be-all and end-all of theater, and refused instead to become an even bigger star in Santa Maria and Salve. But Martha was not daunted. She called every major actor in the world, and she knew them all. James Mason called me and said he was committed to the role, and would I please inform the New York press? Well, there were still 2 columnists who would take my calls, so I gave them the news, they gave it to the world, and then James Mason gave us the news that anyway he couldn't do it because he got a movie called The Hunting Party, for which he got an Oscar nomination. Oh, by the way, Sir John couldn't have done the play anyway either because he got a movie called Arthur, for which he won his Oscar. And that was the last 2 press people that had ever spoken with me. Vincent Price was determined to do Pilate. But anyway, he called saying, Robert, darling, I've been offered a national tour of my one-man show about Oscar Wilde. And I own it, Robert. I get all the money. Robert, it's an annuity. Richard Burton was said to be dying to do the role, but he was so surrounded by agents and managers and lip spittles, even Martha never actually spoke to him. But anyway, he got the movie of Equus. Tony Perkins' agent could not get it through her head that Pilate was the lead role of the play. She said, why aren't you asking Tony to play Judas? That's the title. Tony plays only title roles. But anyway, he couldn't have done it because he went into the lead in the Broadway production of Equus after Richard Burton left to do the movie. By the way, Tony didn't play the title role of the horse in Equus. At this point, I said to Martha, jokingly, why don't you get your friend Charlton Heston to do? His name will fill any theater in the world for any length of time. Martha, taking me seriously, said delicately, but Bob, Chuck can't act. Martha, at that point, quit producing to care for an alien husband. But Jose Ferrer, an idol of mine from my youth, he played the dwarf painter Toulouse-Lautrec in the 1953 movie Moulin Rouge, called saying he wanted to do the role, but he had no money. But Joseph Papp, the master of the very, very prestigious Public Theater in New York, had said he would do any script Jose chose. So I was assigned to take the script from Mr. Papp. We had never met, and we had always wanted to work together. We got along like two old whores in a jacuzzi. Growing camaraderie, he walked me to the elevator, and as I waited, I turned and saw him handing the script to his wife and literary manager, Gail Merivale, who had already rejected it twice because she did not do plays by openly gay playwrights unless they were about gay men dying horribly of AIDS. I don't know if losing Pilate was good luck for Jose, but I felt incredibly lucky when Mark Leonard, who played Spock's father on Star Trek, called and begged to read the role for me. It was a revelation. He was an American John Gielgud, a Titanic talent thrown away on TV trash. So for that reason, we could not raise money on his name. But I got a theater and produced a 6-month run of one of my surefire moneymakers, Louis for Boys.
What did they do in Gomorrah? A secret up by the sea. We know they got flopped, but nobody stopped to write down the recipe. Oh, what did they do in Gomorrah to make fire and brimstone come down? If God don't trash us for the trash we discuss, then what was the talk of that town? Whatever they played in Gomorrah, the pieces went up in the flame. If you know lobotomy, you know what's called sodomy. But what was the game of their game? Oh, I look to borrow time to horror. We're so polymorphous, perverse. So what did they do in Gomorrah that we don't do worse?
They dancing a homophile aura to get microwaved into it. Alice or Laura. She's cool looking down on such rot. Oh, what did they do in Gomorrah? That got even heaven hot.
Well, the money rolled in, but anyway, Mark Leonard rolled out. He said, Bob, we have to postpone the production. I've been offered a lucrative string of Star Trek conventions. I said, Mark, we've rented the theater, bought your clothes, cast the other roles, and announced the date. You can't postpone. He said, Bob, it's a question of alimony. Only after his death did I learn he had been married to one woman his whole life. I don't know what the alimony play was about, or whether maybe there was some past mistress who had to be paid off. At any rate, theater rented, cast, announcements made. I had to play pilot.
This is not belief. This is beyond belief. Do you think we want your suicide? Do you think we need that? Do you think anyone wants your death but you? Do you think we taught those soldiers to obey to have them march you to Golgotha? Do you think we taught them to follow to have them follow you? Do you think your suffering is what we have taught, fought, killed, and built for? You are wrong, Jesus, wrong. Civilizations are not labored over for the likes of you and me, elevated on our crosses and our towers. Wars are fought for the mind of Judas. Philosophy started with a piece of mind of Judas. Religions are permitted, allowances made, mythologies propounded, not that you or I may win or lose, but only so Judas may rise each morning knowing who he is and what his day's work on that day must be. Jesus, the truth has come against your lies to kill you. Why did you not live to tell the truth? Say you are not king of the Jews and live to me. Say you are not the Son of God and live to show us we all are. Say you are not the enemy of Rome and live to help destroy Rome and rebuild it. Do you think you're alone up here? I know what you're doing and I know the love of whom. But those of us who sacrifice ourselves to systems we do not believe in merely to secure the happiness of others, we may be doing nothing but creating our own destroyer. Why, above all, I understand you feel you must sacrifice yourself, but those feelings are not your own thoughts, and these thoughts are not perhaps my own feelings, but I do cannot believe man can live without faith.
I would imagine Gil could. Things went from bad to hilariously worse for me. I had to go live with family in a tiny upstate California town. I was not spectacularly welcome there. I took most of my meals on a low wall by a local canal. But things brightened when Patrick Stewart, the captain of Star Trek The Next Generation, called asking to see the script of Judas. I said I would send that to him if he would send to me a great big colored photograph of himself autographed to my niece-in-law, Susie. He sent the picture along with the script, saying he had hoped it would be a monologue. I guess he didn't want to pay Price salary. But my stock at home went way up, and from then on, I ate at the family table. My last little brush with celebrity occurred in 1993. When I moved to Los Angeles, my pen name, Robert Patrick, was for the first time listed in a phone book. I instantly began receiving phone calls and fan mail for another Robert Patrick, a young actor who had made a great hit as the liquid metal monster in Terminator 2. Liquid metal monsters had curious fans. Late at night, I would get calls from an 8-year-old boy in Dusseldorf and from an older woman I called the Chinese asthmatic. Chanting, Waput Patwik, Terminator 2, or I learned the young man's address and forwarded his fan mail to him. He replied in a charming boyish scrawl, "When I was a waiter in New York, the restaurant had a poster of Kennedy's children. It did me good to see that someone with my name could become famous." I hadn't the heart to tell him that the restaurant is famous for hanging only the posters of fantastic flops. Thank you. Half of you have heard all of those stories before. I want to thank my producer, Jason Jin. He bullied me into playing this and above all, said I needed some gesture for the last moment. Jason, you were right. I believe there's some sort of socializing now. Please remain.